What is good, everybody? This is TAETRO, and today I want to talk to you about Artiphon's latest controller and also just instrument, Chorda. I say controller and instrument because, of course, we can connect it to the computer and use it as a MIDI controller, but also we don't need to be connected to anything at all. It has a built-in speaker, and we can actually make sound with this thing with no computer across its different modes. All stuff we're going to get into today, but right up front, we'll say that Artiphon is not sponsoring this video. However, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, and I'll tell you all about that in a minute. So even though this isn't sponsored by Artiphon, this is one of the first units that they sent out to artists, and it is a very early unit, and it is different than a unit that you will receive. They've actually made some improvements. My speaker is a little rattly, and Artiphon has told me that they've completely replaced that for the units that are shipping to customers. My A button is also incredibly hard to push down, and I've been told that that has been totally replaced. Now, when I met with Artiphon to talk about Chorda, they brought those things up and told me that they were already replaced for the units that are shipping before I even brought them up. So it's not going to really affect this video that much, but just a caveat that if you see maybe some differences, it's because this is a very early unit. For now, let's get into what's cool about Chorda. So if you know anything about the company Artiphon, you know that they're known for making the Instrument 1 way back when, and they've also been making the Orbas 1 and 2, which is a sample-based instrument. Chorda is essentially the natural evolution from these two instruments. It can be used to play notes, as well as chords, you can finger drum on this thing, and there's also a bass mode. Now, those four modes we just talked about, drum, bass, chord, and lead, I'm able to switch between those two modes by holding the A button, selecting the mode I want to be in, drum, bass, chord, or lead. And on the instrument on either side, you will find text. We have our four modes, drum, bass, chord, lead, all here, and then we have a bunch of other functionality. And probably the most interesting feature about the Chorda is that it can be strummed, like a strummed instrument with these 6 sensors on the bridge. We can strum through each one of those notes. Here, let me change instruments. I have MIDI instruments loaded up in Ableton Live right now. So now we are going to be playing a Chorda instrument from Contact, but we can strum through each note on the bridge, or we can strum through the whole chord. Selecting a note on a different pad will change which chord that is, and all these chords are in key. We can change what key Chorda is in as well. That is a lot of fun. These pads work very similarly to the Orba 2, where they are just a hard plastic, but they are touch sensitive. So I can glide across them, or with the instrument laid down like this, I can play it as a keyboard. Currently, I'm plugged in via USB-C, but let's unplug that for a moment so I can show you that Chorda can also just be held. I believe we will get a strap accessory for this eventually. However, even if you don't have a strap, it's actually very easy to just handhold, almost like a ukulele. It's also very thin. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it's quite thin, easy to travel with, easy to carry. Now, I did unplug the USB, but we can also connect via Bluetooth. That's really easy to do on Mac. I know Windows users, it's not so easy for you. But if I just go to my MIDI studio and my Bluetooth connections here, I can connect to the Artiphon Chorda so easily. And just like that, we're playing totally wirelessly. Now, there's an arpeggiator built in, and a lot of the ways we navigate around Chorda, you've probably already seen me doing this, is by holding the A button here and selecting a mode. Like, for instance, we could switch back to drum or chord mode from here. Let's go to chords. If I hold A and I turn the arpeggiator on, now while we're in chord mode, it's actually going to arpeggiate through the chords instead of just playing them in one shot. And As I slide, I'll call this vertically because from your orientation it's vertically. If I slide up the instrument like that, I'm actually able to increase the ARP's rate. So now while in lead mode, I'll turn the arpeggiator on. I can increase the rate as I slide up the instrument. Now, the way that functions is different per the different modes. So if I go to drum, and let's arm the drum instrument here and turn the arpeggiator on, it's not going to be so extreme. Like, it's not going to go all the way up to 30-second notes for something like the kick, but for something like a hi-hat, we'll get a higher rate. So this is just with the arpeggiator active. Now that's built into Chorda's internal clock. It doesn't appear currently that there's a way to sync that with our DAW's clock, but for its standalone functionality, that's pretty useful. I want to tell you about that standalone quality, but one other cool quick feature first is that just like we saw with the arpeggiator, we can move kind of in this motion across the instrument. Let's go back to lead and let me turn the arpeggiator off. We can do that for different sound design things too. So that really cool bass sound that I'm adjusting over time by moving across the instrument, I'm actually doing that without having done any extra mapping or anything. I just have Arturia's Jupiter 8th synth, and that cutoff on the filter just kind of automatically synced up to that gesture. That being said, you can map that gesture as well. So let me go to my Casper preset, which is a preset from my Spectral Keys pack. Let's go ahead and map this to the Rode, which is going to give us like a bit crush sound. Gone ahead and mapped that to that knob there. So now I've made a custom mapping where I can use that gesture to change the sound in a way that I want. I want to tell you about using Chorda as a standalone function, being able to do looping on it on its own without a computer required. And I also want to tell you some of the things I don't like about Chorda, but I'm going to tell you that after I tell you about today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. They've got a learn by doing approach, which you can see right on their class pages. You can see class projects, meaning you can see progress from other people in the class who are taking on the same challenges you are. If you're interested in learning an instrument or basic things about music and music production, they've got plenty of classes for you on Skillshare, including classes taught by Ableton certified trainers. You all know that I've taken on another hobby of visual art. Being that I'm a musician, I wanted another creative outlet, and Skillshare was perfect for that. I took on some of the beginning watercolor classes, and I'm also starting to take some of the drawing classes so I can improve my paintings and drawings. So if you're ready to take on a new skill, the first 500 of my subscribers to use the link in the description. It's 1 month free to try something new. There's no risk there. Are you going to take on painting or art like me, or do you want to dive deeper into music production and how to play instruments? I would love to hear from any of you taking on some classes in the comments. And I also want to point out that Kristen in the comments in my last Skillshare video said, "Thanks for the Skillshare promotion. I'm a front-end software developer and recently laid off with many other devs on my team, looking to use Skillshare to help fill in some gaps with UX and UI design in Figma." That's a perfect opportunity to take if you want to grow career skills or artistic skills, whatever it may be. Skillshare is the place to do that. All right, let's talk more about Chorda. Okay, so far we've been using Chorda as a MIDI controller, but now let's instead grab an aux cable, and everything you're going to be hearing now is going to be audio from the instrument. I'm going to unarm any of my MIDI tracks in Ableton Live. We are going to listen purely via audio, and I'm going to increase the volume with the volume rocker here on the bottom where the power button is located as well. You're going to see those LEDs light up over time. And like I said, this audio that you're now hearing is coming directly from the instrument. In fact, if I unplug this cable, you can see that there's a speaker on top. And we can play this totally freely as its own standalone instrument. We have access to different presets on the instrument as well. So selecting lead mode, I can use the bridge to select a different preset. Do that again, select another preset. We have a piano preset. Same thing goes for each different mode. So going to chords. Oh, I have the arpeggiator still turned on. Let me turn the arpeggiator off. Of course, the arpeggiator is still functional in its standalone instrument mode. And the preset selecting works the same way. Select chord, and now let's scroll up through the presets. We have a synth. Let's go to drum mode. I think you get the idea here. I think the one function I didn't show off was octave. So here we are back on lead, and I'm in a piano preset. I'll select the octave function using the bridge here again to increase the octave. And we've increased the octave. We can, of course, decrease it back down. So navigating around that is pretty simple and intuitive. You also have the LEDs across the instrument, which give you some indication about where you are in terms of what preset you have selected, what octave you're on, etc. There is the Artiphon Connect app, which allows you to change what presets are on your instrument, and you can do that for each individual mode: drums, bass, chord, and lead. So drums, there's a number of selections here. I actually developed a set of sounds for Orba 2 that ended up getting transferred over to being able to use them in Chorda. So that's pretty cool. You can find my sound pack there if you have either Orba or Chorda. You can also do fun things like import your own sample or record your own samples in. They've totally reworked how drum sampling works for Chorda in that you have slot assignment and you can put a different sample on each slot. You can record directly from the device you have the Artiphon Connect on, or you can import samples from your sample folder. Cool way to build your own kits. So you can use the app to make your own sampled instruments, whether that be drums across the pads or a single note that it'll turn into a sample instrument. It's pretty cool. Finally, we have a way to sort of like make your own song or like a quick demo here on the Chorda itself by doing some recording. So if I hit the play button here, okay, so we've got our tempo, 2, 3, 4. Let's go to record. Let's get the drums going, 2, 3, 4. Jump out of record mode. So now we've recorded a loop, and the LEDs are actually showing me where we're at in that loop. So where the downbeat is. 2, 2, 3. We've recorded a 2-bar loop for now. Let's go to chord mode. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, go. We've recorded that. Back to record mode. We've recorded that. Out of record mode again, so I can go to lead. Something now. And that's been recorded. Out of record mode again. Pause. You notice that the click track turns off when you're not in record mode, but it's always on when you are recording. So that's just a little fun feature, and to be honest, it's a feature that I'm probably not going to use a lot, but maybe some of you might find it fun to just kind of sit and jam on an instrument. Don't need to plug into a computer at all to do that. And one thing that's interesting is if you play this back while it's connected via MIDI, it's going to send MIDI on all those parts. So if you make like a little nice melody or a nice beat, nice rhythm or something, you want to bring it back to your computer, you can essentially send all that MIDI over to your DAW and turn it into a full track at some point if you wanted to. But let me tell you about a few of the limitations that I see and a few ways that they could improve Chorda. This lead instrument, you probably noticed that it's not a traditional major scale. And from what I see, there's actually no way for me to change that in the Artiphon Connect app. Each preset, the scales seem to be tied to the presets. And that's true also for chords. These chords are perfectly fine. And actually, let's switch back to controlling MIDI for now. I have to turn the volume of the instrument down so I don't hear both at the same time. There's definitely like very specific voicings happening here. Now, generally, the voicings are tied to the preset as well, but there's not a ton of options. So in the Artiphon Connect app, if I go back to our chord selection for our preset, I can go to different presets. Like I can just select any old preset here, click play. And it'll have like some specific voicings for those chords. That being said, there's not a whole lot of selection. There is a preset called Soul Chords, which has sevenths and ninths. But it would be nice, like some other gear has given you in modern day, to have overall global selection for what type of chord voicings you want. And on that note, back to the point about the lead scale, it would be nice to also have control over what the scale is that I'm playing. So I'm not stuck in some kind of pentatonic scale all the time. I think I breezed over this earlier, but you can transpose the instrument and change the key that you're in. One more thing is that this gesture is very easy to control and pretty easy to map, actually. The gyroscope internally, which is supposed to let you, move the device and change parameters over time, it feels a little more difficult to control and map. Hopefully that can be tuned with a firmware update. My last nitpick here is that being that this is a strummed instrument, when you pick up a guitar, you put your fingers down on the strings and you strum it. Unless you're doing an intentional hammer-on, that initial putting your fingers down on a chord doesn't make a sound. However, on Chorda, you can't actually strum a chord without having first having an initial sound. I think it should just be in Artiphon Connect. You can select strum only mode. So when you press on the pads while you're in chord mode, I should be able to just strum chords. Overall, one of the reasons I really like the Chorda by Artiphon is because this is like a sci-fi imagining of the future in terms of an instrument. You could use it as a controller, which is pretty much how I'm going to be using it most of the time. But using it as its own standalone instrument, if you play in an ensemble or with a band, being able to walk up with an electronic instrument that holds samples that you can kind of like hold like a guitar, play and move around and things like that. I think that's incredibly unique, and it's a vision of the future I like to see because we have plenty of controllers that are pads, keys, and knobs. We need more innovative styles. We need more interesting ways of playing music with electronic and MIDI devices. And what Artiphon has really achieved here is they've taken the interesting form factor of the Instrument One, but stripped away some of the inconveniences of having it being sort of mimicking a guitar, taken some of the conveniences of Orba and put it into an instrument that's really fun to play and really interesting and unlike many other controllers and instruments currently on the market. So I would love to hear what you think of the Chorda by Artiphon. If you're planning on picking one up, I've got an affiliate link in the description. Also a link to Skillshare. Don't forget, when you support the sponsor, you support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.